46 degrees in Simpsonville, South Carolina, Wednesday. We're in Exodus chapter 14. What was Moses' second statement after he said, "Stand still and watch the salvation of the Lord"? Moses' second statement. What was God's strange battle plan as the Egyptians were closing in on the Israelites at the Red Sea? What was God's strange battle plan? Question number 3. There was a wall of water on both sides of the Israelites as they crossed over. What was so strange about that, and what was so good about that? Question number 4. The cloud that caused confusion. How does that play into this whole story? The cloud that caused confusion. Question number 5. What was it that Moses raised in order to close the water over the Israelites, over the Egyptians? What was that Moses raised in order to close the water over the Egyptians? Really a strange story if you really think about it. First of all, let's take the first question. Moses' second statement. Actually, it's the second and third statement that are just incredibly interesting. First, he said, "You'll never again see these Egyptians, those that you see today." Now remember, this is before God revealed his plan to Moses. And Moses said right after that, "The Lord will fight for you while you keep silent." Boy, that's a nice promise, isn't it? It's found in 14:14. Pretty easy to remember, 14:14. But Moses again said, the Lord's going to fight for you. I think sometimes we forget that we have to sometimes just step back and let the Lord do our fighting for us. Question number 2. God's strange battle plan. You got to really read through chapter 14 and 15 again and see the beauty of it. But God's strange battle plan wasn't just to part the Red Sea and then close it over the Egyptians. If you've just settled for that, you've settled for the movie adaptation of this story. First of all, Moses didn't strike the water with the rod. He just held it up over the water. And then the other strange thing is that God said they would cross over on dry ground. Have you ever crossed over something that was water one minute and then it was dry ground? I can tell you that doesn't happen here in the condo complex. There's clay underneath our grass, and the ground stays wet for a long time before the water soaks in. They would cross over on dry ground. Then the Lord said, "They'll know that I am the Lord." They'll know that I am the Lord. And the cloud that had been leading the Israelites now moved around behind the Israelites and separated the Egyptians from the Israelites so they could get into this opening in the Red Sea and cross over safely while the Egyptians couldn't see what they were doing. And then you'll find that the waters were divided in such a way that they were heaped up, which brings us to the third question, which is, what was so interesting about that? Well, I don't know how that might have seemed to the Egyptians and to the Israelites, but it would have been terrifying to me. I like to be in control. I'm a little claustrophobic, can skin dive, but I can go to the top anytime I want to. Even with an aqualung, I know I'm in control. But here's these walls of water on both sides, and I assume that these walls of water were very deep, and they could close back over at any time. These people who had said we'd rather be back in Egypt dying are having the faith to cross through these walls of water on dry ground. That's really interesting, isn't it? Because it takes a lot of faith sometimes to follow God's leading. And these people had shown faith. Quite an interesting part of the story. The cloud that caused confusion? Well, when the Egyptians got into the Red Sea, and it's a fairly wide spot where most people believe they crossed over, instead of being able to get some of them out, the chariots and the horsemen and all of the soldiers were in the midst of the Red Sea when the water began to fold back over, and a cloud came down in the midst of the Egyptians and caused the chariots to swerve and block the way of the others, and they didn't know which way was out. They lost all track, just as you can in fog. You can lose all track of what's going on. And they lost all track of what was going on until they were all drowned. What was it that Moses held over the water to bring the water back over the Egyptians? Well, it wasn't his rod. If you put down rod, you're wrong. Look again, chapter 14, verses 26 and around that area, and you'll find that he raised his hand only, and the water closed back over the Egyptians, and not even one remained. Imagine total annihilation of your enemy. That's what will happen when Jesus comes back again. When he rules and reigns and we spend our eternity with him in heaven, he'll rule and reign because our enemy and his enemy will be annihilated completely. And then there's a very interesting statement at the very end of chapter 14. The people saw the great power of the Lord, and they had a fear of the Lord. Now, the Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, because we're not talking about cowering, thinking that he's going to always drown us in a bottle of water, but that we would respect him because of the power that he has, knowing his potential and his might, that we would have a great respect, a fear, if you will, but not the kind of fear that a child has of a parent beating them. And then finally it says, and they believed in him and in Moses. God, when he brings us through trials and tribulations, has a great desire for our faith to grow and for us to learn to trust him. That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a wonderful day.